Welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. And boy, oh boy, we've got someone today talk about business, life, and all points in between. This is all business, all life, and all points in between. Deb Krier is joining us. She is an integrative cancer coach. She supports high-performing professionals with practical tools, emotional resilience, and strategies for continuing to lead with purpose through life's most difficult challenges. And today, the program, we're going to talk about how to lead a business when life throws you a health crisis. And Deb, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am honored to be a guest. We're going to have a great discussion.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, anybody who read the show description was like, wow.
Ah!
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, what a relevant topic that truly affects us all. And I think is so important. And as you mentioned before we got on, often not talked about. So, Deb, why don't you bring everyone up to speed with your personal journey and your professional one and what you're doing?
Right. Well, again, thank you so much. So it's been 11 years since I first was told, hey, you have a bad mammogram. You need to come back. And I know just enough to be dangerous. I worked for an oncologist and I worked for the American Cancer Society. And so I knew that when they said, hey, you need to come back, it wasn't because I didn't smile pretty, right?
Yeah.
And so went back, and the initial diagnosis was what they called stage 0 cancer, which is precancer. Let's watch it. Let's just, not be too concerned. Didn't even get an oncologist. Did have a couple other biopsies, which, didn't show anything. And then my doctor, several months into this, said, let's do a little bit more aggressive testing. And so they took lymph nodes from the affected side, and 8 of 12 lymph nodes showed cancer. So I went from stage 0 to stage 3, plunk, right? I mean, it was, and so I thought, well, I guess I better get an oncologist. But, I ran, and still run my own business. And I looked at my doctor and I said, I'm sorry, I don't have time for this. And she looked at me and went, well, you better make time. But I still thought it would be very easy to deal with. Met with my oncologist. She said, we need to get pretty aggressive with the treatment. And so I had 8 different drugs, which is not unusual. Chemo is usually not one drug. It's what they call a cocktail. And my body didn't like it in the slightest. And I got a reaction that less than 1% get because I'm special. And I ended up in septic shock in the hospital. And the doctors were arguing over how fast I would die that day.
Oh, my.
And I remember thinking, excuse me, I get to vote. And so I spent 7 weeks in the hospital. In amongst all of that, I did say, hey, I've got a pain on the what we call the bad side. And they did another really fun biopsy. And it came back as what they called inconclusive. And so my oncologist said, we're just not going to deal with this. We're going to call it stage 4. And in some of my medical records, it does actually say that I have bone cancer. Now, that's never done anything. It is something obviously that we watch. But, I just went merrily along, had, I could not do any more chemo. I mean, that was, we tried one more time and I had the exact same reaction and ended up back in the hospital, not nearly as serious. But, I had chosen to do the traditional type of treatment. I was going to do chemo, surgery, radiation. So I go through all of that, but I kept running my business the whole time. And it was one of these things, partially because I needed something to think about, something to focus on. And fortunately for me, my clients said, what do we need to do to help you? They didn't say, no, you can't do this. They said, no, what can we do to help you? In fact, I still work with them. Same clients from 11 years ago.
That's awesome.
And, got much better. Along the way, I had 2 more cancer diagnoses. Wow. I had one, it's about 5 years ago, that is basal cell carcinoma. You recognize that, right? And it sounds the worst, right? To all of those things. Yeah. It's skin cancer. It's your basic skin cancer. And I am a red-headed, freckly kid that grew up in the mountains of Colorado. It was surprising that I was as old as I was before I got skin cancer.
Right.
And so, that was easy to treat. But 3 years ago, we were doing a follow-up test on the breast cancer, and they said, well, everything's good there, but you always like those, right?
Yeah.
And they said you have a lesion on your thyroid, and it turned out I actually had two tumors on my thyroid. Removed those, and so I had thyroid cancer, and it is a totally separate cancer. So I've had three different diagnoses of cancer. I told you I'm special.
Yeah.
I just have to be the overachiever. But along the way, people said, "Hey, you've been through a lot. You need to use it to help others."
Yeah.
And I told him, "But I don't want to be cancer girl.
Yeah.
No." Now, okay, we were talking about AI before the program started. I did have AI generate a cancer girl image, right? She's got her cape, she's, all this, but I decided that, yeah, what can I do to help people along this journey? And that has evolved now into working with executives who are dealing with a serious cancer diagnosis, and they're trying to run their business, keep their employees happy, do all those things, and deal with it potentially being very ill.
That is a lot to try and handle.
And
And
that was the Reader's Digest version.
yeah, no, I mean, that's a
Mhm,
lot to try and
mhm,
handle for an
mhm,
executive.
mhm, mhm,
Your story is a lot
mhm,
to handle as
mhm,
well, and pretty amazing in the resilience. And I mean, we've been talking now
mhm,
for what, almost a half an hour,
mhm.
and I'm just so immediately taken by your pluck and your wit and your ability. I can see that
Mhm,
really
mhm,
got you through
mhm. It
a
did.
lot of
Mhm,
stuff.
mhm,
And the so let's just talk a little bit about the issue here before
mhm,
we get into how to solve it and what
mhm,
you can do to combat it. But
mhm,
you know, I think it's something that nobody really thinks about
mhm.
in terms of, people talk
Right.
about having
Mhm,
cancer and what it would do, but
mhm,
you're a leader now. You've
mhm,
got a ton of
mhm,
responsibility. Tell me a little bit about what you've seen
mhm,
and the impact, and share with you, if you'd like, some of the research you
mhm,
just did
mhm.
about what happens to somebody who is a leader
Right.
once they are diagnosed with
Mhm,
cancer or have a health
mhm.
crisis.
Right. Well, the first thing is your brain shorts out, right? You're told, hey, you have cancer. And the next thing in your brain is, I'm going to die.
Right.
I mean, and it doesn't matter what type of cancer. And fortunately, the vast majority of cancer diagnoses are quick and easy to treat. Now, there might still be things that you're having to deal with, but it's really not something that is going to be a long-term type of thing, but there are times where it is. And so, when you're dealing with that, the issue is that you are in charge, you are in control, you are the boss, and ooh, all of a sudden you're not.
Hmm.
And you're also thinking, well, I can't tell anyone. And you mentioned research. I did a research study, and that was one of the things that came up the most was I couldn't tell anyone because they would think I can't do my job, I can't run my company, I can't do any of that. I might lose my job. I mean, I talked with an HR professional. She was the head of her HR department, and she didn't want to tell anybody because she thought that they would use that as a reason to let her go.
Hmm.
And most of us live in at will states, right? Where they're not gonna say, well, you have cancer, so we're firing you. But they could say, you're not doing your job.
Right.
And so, in many cases, people, whatever level it is, they don't want to tell. But and like I said, in many cases, most of the time, people never know. They just never know. But clearly, if you've lost your hair, if you've had surgery, all these various things, it's going to be pretty obvious. But yeah, an executive, they're thinking, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with my family? And how do I still run my company? And as we all know, many times as executives, our personal health comes last. you know,
Right.
we don't eat well, we don't sleep well, all of those various things. And so then you're thrown for a loop where you've got to pay attention to this.
Yeah. So what is the thought process,
Mhm,
or what do you
mhm,
do after that point where,
mhm,
okay, I found out,
mhm,
and
mhm,
what do you tell people to do?
mhm,
And because I
mhm,
imagine it really probably depends on
mhm,
the diagnosis,
mhm.
like you
Right.
said. Like
Mhm,
some it's like,
mhm.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I
Mhm,
need some
mhm,
treatment,
mhm,
whatever, I can
mhm,
keep working. Some
mhm,
it's going to
mhm,
be a little more
mhm,
dire.
mhm. Right.
Tell me about what the next steps are.
Well, the first thing I tell people is Dr. Google is not your friend. You know, if you Google, say, breast cancer, you're immediately just going to get overwhelmed and
Yeah.
think, and folks, AI is really not your friend in this circumstance.
Mm,
Because it pulls the good, the bad, the ugly. And
right.
and so you don't want to do that. Do you want to research? Yes. I did. I mean, even with my background, there were words that I did not know or did not remember. And so I would search, but then I'd stop. But the thing you need to remember is you are in charge. It is your decision what you're doing, what type of treatment you want. Maybe you're going to, choose non-traditional. Maybe you're going to choose to not have treatment, whatever, or you're going to choose, very aggressive. There's so many different options now, and so research without getting overwhelmed, which is hard. But the thing to really remember is those people in those white coats. We love them. We love them dearly. Our life is in their hands, but they're not in charge. And so, you need to make those decisions. And that's where it does kind of come in handy if you're an executive, is you're used to making those decisions
Yeah.
and, and being the person in charge. But, then you need to decide, what am I going to tell? And who am I going to tell? And like I said, many people choose not to tell at all. Now, if it becomes obvious, then you've got a different thing. Most of my history, my career history is corporate communications and employee communications. And we hate a vacuum, right? And
Right.
so if somebody can look at somebody and go, they're looking a bit rough, they're going to make it up, if you
Yeah.
haven't told them. So you want to control that narrative. Now, you don't have to give every single detail.
Yeah.
You might just say, I'm going through something from a health, perspective. I'll keep you posted, but I need your help. And then you get to delegate, you get to empower, you
Mm.
get to go, ooh, I hired really good people. Now let's let them shine. And that's one of the hardest things too, because people are like, okay, so I delegate and I empower. What if they then decide they don't need me? Right? Well, that's okay. Then you can do something else, maybe with the company, maybe volunteer, whatever, right? Maybe it freed you up to work on a new service or product, whatever it is. But, we are used to planning. So let's plan this out
Yeah.
and figure it out. But then go back and look at your business and think about some simple basic things that we all should have done, and that's things like business continuity planning. Who knows where your passwords are? Who knows who your bank is? Who knows who your banker is? Now, granted, we usually don't have bankers anymore, right?
Right.
But just all of those things that in many cases are, especially as the leader, are in our heads.
Hmm.
My husband, and I was very critical for several weeks, he couldn't get into my computer to pay our bills
Oh boy. Yeah.
because of the password, right? And and how many times have we done that with our business? We might have set up online payment. Now I'm old school. I do have online payment. I love that. I don't write checks, but I don't have auto pay set up.
Right.
So, who's going to get into my computer and do that? Who's going to notify clients, customers, all of those things? Hey, something's going on.
Right.
So just write that down, have it with somebody trusted. And then the really cool thing is once you've done all that and you've planned to possibly be gone, then maybe you can be gone for a good reason, like a vacation.
Oh, right. Sure. Why not? Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I mean, I think it's almost like a backhanded way in terms of what you were talking about with
Hmm.
delegating to
Hmm.
get you to become
Right.
almost a better
Hmm.
leader. I mean, you should be
Hmm.
delegating,
Hmm.
and you
Oh
shouldn't
yeah.
be, it shouldn't rely
Hmm.
totally
Hmm.
on you.
Hmm.
So that in some ways, I guess that
Mhm.
could be a good thing. But
It is.
I do
It's
want to talk.
hard.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
sure. Yeah,
Mhm.
I do want to talk for a second about
Mhm.
that. How much you tell,
Mhm.
and why you should tell,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
my wife is a parent coach,
Ah.
and yeah, and
Mhm.
so a lot of times she's talked about where there's a problem in the
Mhm.
family,
Mhm.
and maybe it's a cancer
Mhm.
diagnosis,
Mhm.
and she's like, tell your kids,
Mhm.
because the fiction that they're going to
Mhm.
make up if you
Right.
don't is far
Mhm.
worse than the disease.
Yes. Mhm. It's always worse. And I don't know why that's where we go. We look at something and we
Yeah,
immediately jump to the absolute worst case scenario.
yeah. So tell me a little bit now, and if okay, so you've got this, you're figuring out, you're planning,
Mhm.
okay, you're going to start
Mhm.
building some of those
Mhm.
succession things.
Mhm.
What are some of the different styles that people do to
Mhm.
try and manage as they're going,
Mhm.
working with the illness, and
Mhm.
then also trying to stick in the
Mhm.
day to day? I mean,
Mhm.
what do you tell people? Is it like, listen to your
Mhm.
body
Mhm.
first, put yourself
Mhm.
first before the
Mhm.
company? I mean, how do they get through the
Yeah.
day to day?
I tell people it's the airplane rule, and I can't take credit for this. I've heard other people say it, but you have to put your mask on first
Oh
before
yeah,
you can help anybody else, right?
yeah,
And so you really have to pay attention to what your body is telling you. And especially when you're dealing with treatment, surgery, all sorts of things like that, because if you keep pushing yourself, and this is with any type of thing, but especially with some things like this, you're going to make yourself sicker, and even just things like, well, I'm not going to take any pain medicine. Well, that's nice, but pain pretty soon will catch up and it will be worse.
yeah,
And pain is the body's way of saying, hello, there's a problem. And so I'm not saying, take so much that you don't feel the pain, but acknowledge that. One of the things that I have discovered, and I'm actually, even after 11 years, still in active treatment. I go in every 21 days. And it makes me, luckily it doesn't do too much, but my reserves are low no matter what. Now, yeah, there's a better week, there's a worse week, all those various things, but I nap. I take a nap almost every day now. I do have chronic pain. I am up to surgery number 34. you know,
wow,
because of everything that has happened. Um, but I have chronic pain, I have, all sorts of things, but I know that if I don't stop and rest even for 15 minutes, then I'm not going to be able to function the rest of the day. So if you've got an office door, shut your office door and nap. Or just, you don't even have to nap, just relax. And know what your body needs, because your body is telling you, hey, this is what's going on. The other thing is to really make sure you're talking to your care team. A lot of people go, oh, getting nauseated with chemo is expected. Well, not always. And so tell your care team, here's what's going on, because they might be able to make adjustments. There's also other things that need to be taken into account. Try and rest as much as you can, eat as well as you can. That sometimes obviously is a challenge. One of the things I had to learn was fast food was no longer my friend. I was one of those people, and my body now says, no, you must eat much healthier.
yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, vegetables. But yeah, it's and so in many ways it is a lifestyle change. And that's okay.
Yeah. Tell me the role of grit in all
Hmm.
this. The business
Hmm.
leaders. These are the people who you can't tell them
Hmm.
that you can't say
Hmm.
no to them.
Right. Hmm.
They will fight through
Hmm.
anything. They're used to just imposing their
Hmm.
will. They're used to defying
Hmm.
the odds.
Hmm. Right.
This is a real, this is a literal
Hmm.
wake up call for
Hmm.
them. And
Hmm.
how do how do leaders reconcile with this? How do they figure it
Yeah.
out?
Well, I tell people, I am still here because I'm a tough old broad. And but And I think that is part of it. Now the nice word for it is resilience, right? We're
Yeah.
resilient. Um, but also know that there are going to be bad times, whether it's mental, whether it's physical, and that's okay. Give yourself the grace to be angry, to be grieving. Your life has changed. Even if you get 100% hunky-dory diagnosis, it's still back there. And
Yeah.
you're always going to think, ooh, what if? And so give yourself the opportunity to go through those emotions, and don't just soldier on, as my dad would have said, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to have the pity party, just don't live there.
Yeah. I'm Tuesdays with Maury is such a great
Hmm. Hmm.
book. And
Hmm.
I just remember Maury always wake up early in the morning and just cry and feel horrible for
Hmm.
himself.
Hmm.
And it was like 15 minutes. And
Hmm.
then he's like, I'm
Yeah.
good. I'm
Okay.
done for the
Hmm.
day. Here we
Right.
go.
Hmm.
Um, so tell me a little bit about, we talk in the show a lot about emotional
Hmm.
intelligence, and you're really, I mean, you as coaching someone,
Hmm.
how does that work with people?
Hmm.
I mean, are you talking to them and then trying to get them to feel the feels
Hmm.
and make them aware of things like that?
Hmm.
Because I imagine EQ is going to be
Right.
critical to get you through this.
Yeah. And there is recognizing when someone is just putting on that fake front, right? The I have to be tough. I have to get through this. And just letting them know more than anything that it's okay to feel bad. And to feel alone. I remember I did a Facebook post one time, and somebody who I didn't even know, I mean, just responded and said, when I was diagnosed, I've never felt so alone in my entire life.
Wow.
And it just broke your heart.
Why
And
is that?
and now here's the thing that happened. Other people responded who did not know that person either, and
Okay.
said, what can we do?
Yeah.
We're here for you. So you might not be able to really share with your team, your spouse, your partner. You might not really feel comfortable sharing all of that, but when you find someone that you can share with, that's okay. And maybe it is somebody like me who has been there, done that. But it really is. I hate to do the cliche. It's a safe space, but it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
If somebody's feeling angry, tearful, whatever, and all of that can be at the same time, right? Just acknowledge and let them know, you know, this is okay.
Is that loneliness that you just mentioned?
Mhm.
Is that attributed to the fact that it's one of those topics we really don't talk a lot about?
Mhm.
And why did that person
Right.
feel so alone?
Well, he never shared why, but I think it is something that a lot of people go through, and the people I've talked to have all said things like that. Part of it is we, as in the patient, which I don't like that word, but it's the cancer, whatever we are. I say I'm a warrior, and I know a lot of people don't like that term, but I'm fighting for my life, right?
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, we don't want to be a burden. We don't want to make people feel bad. We don't, all of
Right.
those various things. So we don't share.
Yep.
Other people don't know what to say. I was stunned at the people who ghosted me, the people who I'd been friends with for 40 years. And I don't, and who still won't talk to me about it. I don't know if it makes them think of their own mortality, or if they think I'm going to just collapse in tears, whatever. I mean, all those things. But I've also been absolutely amazed at the people who stepped up. People who I didn't even think knew I existed, and have stepped up to say, what can we do to help? Um, but but yeah, I think we're all, I'm an only child, so I was not used to sharing. And but I think from that perspective, we don't always, we don't want to bother, and we don't want to be, we don't want to be the whiny. We don't want to, people will ask me, how you doing? And I say, I'm hunky dory, or I'm not looking up at 6 feet of dirt, so I'm doing pretty good, right? um and people who know me know that if I say I'm fine, That's the warning signal, right? Husbands know that, right? If you ask your wife and she says, "I'm fine," oh, danger, danger.
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
Um, but yeah, that usually, something, if I don't respond saying, that I'm really, really good, then there's a problem. But it also means that we've got to be honest and we've got to be truthful. If somebody's just casually saying how you doing, well, you don't need to lay everything on the out there. But if they really honestly want to know, then it's okay to tell them. And I tell people when they've told me, they said, we didn't know what to say. We just didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you can't ignore it. I'm bald. I'm whatever. and
Hmm.
and I said, it's okay to just say, I'm sorry this happened to you.
Yeah.
And then you go on from there.
Yeah. I can see it. I mean, it is uncomfortable. I mean, you're
Mhm.
getting into the feels and you're getting into your
Mhm.
own emotions.
Mhm.
And if you don't know how to handle
Mhm.
your own
Mhm.
emotions, you sure as heck don't
Mhm.
want to mess with somebody else's. So I
Right.
can I
Mhm.
can see it.
Mhm.
But Deb, I want to ask you, what happens or how do you coach? I mean, you're a warrior.
Mhm.
God bless you for fighting so hard, but what happens when things don't go right? I mean,
Mhm.
what do you tell coaches,
Right.
and what is their course of action when
Mhm.
things aren't going to
Mhm.
go the way we want?
Then it comes back. Some of it is planning, right? If it was your business, you need to make sure that whatever happens is going to happen, right? Is it something you can sell? Is it something you need to shut down? Who do you need to notify? I mean, all of those various things. Um, and but remember, it's just your business. Now it is your legacy in a lot of cases, but it's we all are going to die. It's just some of us got our expiration dates moved up, right? um and so it's something that every person, I think, is and part of this, it might be a faith question, right?
Mhm.
For some people, they're okay with it, but you need to come to terms with it, and you might need help in that.
Yeah,
You might need to talk to a spiritual advisor, a counselor, somebody like that. But we all could walk out tomorrow and get hit by a bus.
yeah,
So what steps have you taken? And the thing I really tell people is, don't put things off. Tell people you appreciate them.
mm,
Tell them you
yeah,
love them,
yeah.
and all of those things, because you don't know when something might catastrophically happen.
Boy, buses get a bad rap.
I
Everybody
know,
thinks,
I'm always going to get hit by a bus, right?
I used to work for the transit system here
Oh
in
no.
Madison, so I was like, that was
Mhm.
going to be my
Mhm.
ironic death, was
Mhm.
to get hit by a bus.
Yep.
Um, but let's just talk for a second
Mhm.
about any other practical
Mhm.
strategies that you might
Mhm.
have, and and really, what if they want
Mhm.
to get started?
Mhm.
Is there some sort of
Mhm.
framework that
Mhm.
you work through with your
Mhm.
clients to
Mhm.
get them started? And
Right.
then do you touch are
Mhm.
you in touch with
Mhm.
them regularly as
Mhm.
they're going through the illness, or
Mhm.
how does the whole coaching work?
All of the above.
Okay.
It depends on the level of support that they want, and part of it, let's be honest, depends on what's happening with them.
Yeah.
They might only be able to talk once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, there's texting, there's WhatsApp, there's all of those other things that we can use. But it is, part of it is, kind of, just chatting with them to get an idea of where they are and what they're going through and where they think they might have holes. And saying, hey, have you done business continuity planning? Do have you written those things down? And then some on the personal side, how are you exercising? How's your sleep patterns? My watch is really funny. It tells me, my sleep every night, every morning I wake up, and it never gets above, you had okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. But and so it is, kind of talking through that. It's something that usually is going to take a little bit longer. It's not a one one talk and they're done.
Yeah.
But typically it's several months because again, they're going to be dealing with other things, but it is obviously a little bit more front loaded to be able to get a bunch of stuff done. And there are a lot of questions in there too, like, do you have a will? Do you have your power of attorney? It's probably a little too late to get a key man policy, but just kind of walking through, here's the things. And I try and make it as easy as possible because they're dealing with a lot,
Yeah.
and so I don't want them to all of a sudden think, oh my God, she's going to make me do this and this and this and this and this and
Yeah.
so it's more, what is their bandwidth, and what do they want to do, and what do they feel up to.
Yeah, I can see there's just so many
Mhm,
practical
mhm,
things that they don't think about,
mhm,
and then there's
mhm,
so many personal
mhm.
things that they need
Right.
to think
Hmm.
about,
Yeah.
and you
Hmm.
really cover them. But
Hmm.
what's key man policy?
So it's an insurance policy that companies, usually if you've got, you know, if it's a one person shop, you probably don't have that. But, it's, even small businesses, it is a life insurance policy. If
Uh,
a key person, I'm not an insurance salesman, but, um, you usually would have it on, say, your president, your vice president. If something catastrophic happens to them, then it pays out and it pays the business. And so, it is, that is where that happens. And so it might be something worth checking into,
sure.
and but again, that's going to be one of those questions of, ooh, hey, I've had this diagnosis, could I still even get that?
Yeah.
But yeah, just thinking about it, maybe you can't get it, but you might need it for other people that are in your company.
Right. Well, Deb, we're at the top of the hour.
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
thank you so much. It was very illuminating and really kind of sobering, I think,
Hmm.
for a lot of
Hmm.
people. It's something that we all need to think about,
Hmm.
especially business leaders.
Hmm.
And it's a unique perspective that I haven't heard from
Hmm.
anybody. So I'm so glad you're out there
Thank you.
and being a warrior for other
Hmm.
people, Deb.
Thank you.
Okay. And so if someone wants to work with you,
Mhm.
Deb, how do they get a hold of you?
The easiest way is yourcancerwarrior.com. And you'll find two different links there to go to, just the one that's a support group, for anybody who's dealing with a cancer diagnosis, whether they have cancer or it's a friend, or there's also a link there to the strategic advisor program.
Okay, that's awesome stuff. Well, thank you once again. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on another edition of Thought Leaders Live. We'll catch you.